The envelope lay on her windowsill, just as it had every year on her birthday. Pale cream with elegant cursive writing, sealed with a wax stamp. She traced her fingers over her name, Elena Carter, written in ink as dark as midnight. Her heart fluttered, just as it always did when she received these letters. They had started arriving on her 15th birthday, each one filled with the kind of love she had only read about in novels. Soft, poetic confessions that painted her as someone precious, someone adored from afar. And she had always believed they were from him. Liam Hart, her childhood sweetheart. The boy who had held her hand under the autumn leaves, who had kissed her in the rain when they were 17, who had whispered he loved her first. She had never asked him about the letters. Some part of her wanted to believe he was the writer. The version of him in those pages was gentler, more poetic than the boy she knew. But wasn't love supposed to be a little magical? So she let herself believe. Until today. Because today, she finally mentioned them in passing. And Liam had frowned. "What letters?" he had asked, tilting his head in confusion. Elena had laughed at first, nudging him playfully. But when she saw the sincerity in his blue eyes, the world around her tilted. He hadn't written them. Then who had? Her hands trembled as she peeled open the letter, scanning the familiar looping handwriting. But this time, she wasn't caught in the romance of it. This time, she searched for a clue, something, anything, that would tell her who had been writing to her for the past 10 years. And then it hit her. The way certain words were phrased. The way the ink always smudged at the edges, as if the writer had hesitated. Memories flashed, moments she had never paid attention to before. A shadow always lingering nearby. A pair of dark eyes watching her whenever Liam wasn't looking. A quiet presence at her side when she was hurting. The realization crashed into her like a wave, stealing her breath. It wasn't Liam. It was Noah Calloway. Liam's best friend. The boy who had never spoken of love, yet had written her the most beautiful confessions for a decade. The boy who had watched her love someone else, all while pouring his heart onto paper. Elena's pulse pounded in her ears as she clutched the letter. How had she never seen it before? And now that she knew the truth, what was she supposed to do? Elena stood outside the small cafe, where she knew Noah would be. It was where he always went after work, always choosing the quiet corner by the window with his black coffee and a book he never seemed to finish. Her fingers curled around the letter, crumpling the edges. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. She stepped inside. Noah was there, just as she expected. Dark-haired, eyes downcast, thumb idly tracing the rim of his coffee cup. He looked up as the bell above the door chimed, and the moment he saw her, something flickered across his face, like he knew. Elena wasted no time. She strode to his table, dropped the letter onto the wooden surface, and stared at him. "You wrote these." Noah didn't move. He just looked at the letter, then back at her, his expression carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," she said, voice shaking. "Don't lie to me. Not about this." A tense silence stretched between them. The cafe was quiet, save for the soft hum of conversation from the other patrons. Noah sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Elena." "Why?" She cut him off. "Why did you do it?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I had to." She let out a bitter laugh. "That's not an answer, Noah." He exhaled sharply, eyes darkening with something unreadable. "You are in love with Liam." Her breath hitched. "You loved him," he continued, voice quieter this time. "And he made you happy. That's all that ever mattered to me." Elena clenched her fists. "So, you spent 10 years writing me letters, beautiful, heartfelt letters, only to watch me fall for someone else? Do you have any idea how messed up that is?" Noah's jaw tightened. "I never meant for you to find out. That doesn't make it okay." "I know." His calm acceptance threw her off. She had expected excuses, maybe even an argument. But not this. "You should have told me," she said, voice breaking. "You should have said something, Noah. Instead, you let me believe they were from Liam. You let me." She swallowed hard, her throat burning. You let me love someone who never actually saw me the way you did. Noah flinched, as if her words had struck him like a physical blow. He looked away, his fingers tightening around his cup. I never wanted to ruin what you had, he murmured. I just wanted you to feel loved. Even if it wasn't for me. Elena stared at him, her vision blurring. You're an idiot, she whispered. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Yeah. She sat down across from him, rubbing her temples. So what now? Am I supposed to just pretend this doesn't change everything? Noah didn't answer. He simply watched her, his expression guarded yet unbearably vulnerable. Tell me something, she said, leaning forward. If I had figured it out sooner, if I had asked you sooner, would you have told me the truth? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Yes. The honesty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. She hated that she didn't know what to do. Because the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had fallen in love with the words, with the letters, with the person behind them. And now, she didn't know if she had been in love with Liam at all. Or if it had always been Noah. Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. Noah had been her constant, always there, always in the background, always just Noah. The quiet, steady presence that never asked for anything, never demanded attention. And now, everything she thought she knew about him had unraveled in a matter of minutes. She picked up the letter from the table, staring at the words as if they would change if she looked hard enough. But they didn't. They were the same words that had made her heart race for years. Only now they belonged to someone else. Noah hadn't moved. He just watched her, his face unreadable. Say something, she whispered. He exhaled slowly. What do you want me to say, Elena? She shook her head. I don't know. I don't. She let out a sharp, frustrated breath. How long? Noah hesitated. How long what? How long have you loved me? His fingers twitched against the coffee cup. He didn't break eye contact, but she saw the way his jaw clenched, the way his breathing changed. Since we were 16, he finally said, voice so quiet she almost didn't hear him. Elena sucked in a breath. 16? He nodded once. The first time Liam kissed you in the rain, and you came running to tell me about it. A humorless smile tugged at his lips. You were so happy. And I wanted to keep that smile on your face, even if it wasn't because of me. Elena's hands curled around the letter. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that, once she acknowledged, she wouldn't be able to turn back from. Did Liam ever know? She asked. Noah shook his head. No. You never told him? What would be the point? His eyes darkened. He had you. A heavy silence stretched between them. Elena wanted to be angry. She should be angry. But all she felt was a deep, aching sadness. For Noah. For herself. For all the years she had spent believing in a love that wasn't real, when the real thing had been standing beside her all along. She stared at him, at the man who had loved her quietly, selflessly, for so many years. You never even tried, she murmured. Noah let out a short, breathless laugh. I did try. Every year. Every letter. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I told you how I felt 100 different times, Elena. You just never saw it. Her heart pounded. She had read those letters over and over again, memorized them, cherished them. But she had never really looked beyond the words. She had never thought to ask who was loving her this way. Noah pushed back his chair and stood. I should go. Panic shot through her. Noah. Elena. His voice was rough, strained. You've spent years believing Liam was the one. I can't just be the guy you turn to because the truth feels convenient now. Her stomach twisted. That's not. Think about it, he interrupted. His hands clenched at his sides, like he was forcing himself to hold back. Think about what you really want. And if, he hesitated, running a hand down his face. If you ever look at me the way you looked at him, then you'll know where to find me. Then he turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Elena sitting there with a letter that suddenly felt heavier than ever before. Elena sat frozen in the cafe long after Noah had left. His words echoed in her mind. Think about it. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the letter, smoothing out the creases she had left in its delicate paper. She read it again, slowly this time, savoring every word. It wasn't just a love letter. It was a confession of 10 years of longing. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering. How had she been so blind? She thought back to all the times Noah had been there. The way he had always walked on the outside of the sidewalk when they strolled together, how he had memorized her coffee order without ever asking, how he had been the first person to show up whenever she needed someone. The way his gaze always lingered just a second too long before he looked away. And she had never noticed. Tears burned at the back of her eyes as she stood abruptly, shoving the letter into her bag. She needed to clear her head. She needed air. Outside, the evening air was crisp, cooling the warmth on her cheeks. She pulled out her phone, hesitating before dialing a number. Liam answered on the second ring. "Hey, birthday girl," he greeted with a smile in his voice. "You okay?" Elena inhaled sharply. "I need to ask you something."
"Sure."
"What's up?" She closed her eyes for a moment, then forced the words out. Did he ever say anything about me?" There was a long pause. "Liam?"
A sigh.
"Elena, why are you asking me this?" Her stomach twisted.
"Please.
Just tell me the truth." Another silence. And then, "He never said it outright," Liam admitted. "But I knew." Her breath hitched. "You knew? I mean, come on, Elena. He's been in love with you for years. Anyone who paid attention could see it." She gripped the phone tighter. "I didn't see it." Liam chuckled softly, but there was something sad in it. "Because you never looked."
"You were always looking at me."
Elena felt something inside her break at his words. She had been so sure, so convinced that her heart had belonged to Liam all these years. But now she wasn't so sure at all. "Liam," she whispered, "was I ever really in love with you?" There was a beat of silence, and then he sighed. "I think you were in love with the idea of us. The childhood sweethearts, the perfect love story. But real love."
His voice softened.
"I think your heart has always been waiting for something else. You just didn't know it yet." Her chest ached. "God, I feel like such an idiot." "You're not an idiot, Elena." Liam's voice was warm, gentle. "You're just finally seeing what's been in front of you all along." Her throat tightened. "I need to talk to him." "Yeah," Liam said. "You do." She ended the call and took a deep breath. And then, without another second of hesitation, she turned on her heel and ran. Ran toward the one person who had always been there. Ran toward the man whose words had made her fall in love, long before she even knew his name was written on them. Ran toward Noah. Elena barely registered the streets as she ran, her heart pounding harder than her feet against the pavement. The city lights blurred around her, but she didn't slow down. Noah had always been the one to wait. Not tonight. She reached his apartment, chest heaving as she pounded on the door. "Noah." Silence. She knocked again, harder this time. "Noah." Open the door. Still nothing. Her stomach twisted with panic. Had she been too late? Had he decided to walk away for good? She fumbled for her phone, dialing his number. It rang.
Once. Twice.
Then, the door swung open. Noah stood there, looking like he hadn't expected to see her at all. He was in sweatpants and a loose shirt, his dark hair slightly tousled as if he'd run a hand through it too many times. His expression was unreadable. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, guarded. Elena stared at him, breathing heavily. And suddenly, all the words she had rehearsed in her head on the way here disappeared. How did she even begin? Noah sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Elena." "I read the letters again," she blurted out. That made him stop. His jaw tensed, and for the first time, he looked unsure. "I read every single one," she continued, stepping forward. "And I don't know how I missed it before, but now I do. I see it, Noah." His throat bobbed as he swallowed, but he didn't speak. "You loved me," she whispered. "This whole time you—" "I still do," he admitted, cutting her off. The air between them grew heavy. Noah let out a short laugh, shaking his head. You don't have to do this, Elena. You don't owe me anything just because you found out the truth. She flinched. Oh, you? That's what you think this is. He looked away. I spent 10 years writing words I could never say out loud. And now that you know, I don't want to be some second choice you turn to just because Liam wasn't the one after all. Elena's heart ached. You were never second to me, Noah, she said softly. His gaze snapped back to hers, and for the first time, she saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. She stepped even closer, reaching for his hand. He didn't pull away. I don't know how to fix the past, she admitted, voice trembling. I don't know how to undo all the years I spent looking at someone else while the person who truly loved me was right beside me. But I do know one thing. Noah swallowed. What? She squeezed his hand, looking up at him with everything she felt. I don't want to spend another second blind to the truth. His fingers tightened around hers, like he was holding on despite himself. I don't want the letters anymore, she whispered. I want you. Noah's breath hitched. His eyes searched hers, waiting, almost like he didn't believe her. So she closed the distance, rising onto her toes, and kissed him. It was nothing like she imagined, because she had never imagined this. She had never imagined how perfectly he would fit, how the warmth of his lips would feel like home, how his hands would tremble just slightly as they cupped her face like he was afraid she would disappear. But she wasn't going anywhere. When they finally pulled apart, Noah exhaled shakily, pressing his forehead against hers. Tell me this is real, he murmured. Elena smiled, her heart overflowing. It's real. And for the first time, she didn't need a love letter to tell her what she already knew, because the words had always been there. And now, she was finally ready to say them back. 6 months later, Elena stood in the middle of Noah's apartment, her fingers tracing the edges of an old, familiar envelope. His letters. They were neatly stacked in a box, tucked away in the corner of his bookshelf like a secret he had long since learned to live with. But they weren't a secret anymore. Noah walked in from the kitchen, drying his hands with a dish towel. You're staring at those like they might burst into flames, he teased. She looked up at him, smiling. It's still crazy to me, she admitted. How I read every single one of these and still didn't see you. Noah smirked. To be fair, I was a little too poetic for my own good. Maybe I should have just written, hey, Elena, I'm in love with you. Please notice me. She laughed, shaking her head. I don't know. The mystery was kind of romantic. He raised an eyebrow. Romantic? You spent 10 years thinking someone else wrote them. She bit her lip. Okay, maybe not that part. Noah chuckled and walked over to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. But you see me now, he murmured. Her heart warmed. Yeah, she whispered, brushing her lips against his. And I'm never looking away again. His grip on her tightened, his forehead pressing against hers. Good, he murmured, because I'm not writing you any more love letters. Elena pulled back slightly, pouting. What? But I love your letters. Noah smirked. I know. But now, I get to say everything to your face. She melted against him, her smile softening. I think I like that even better. And as he kissed her, slow, deep, and filled with the love that had always been there, she knew she had finally found the words she had been searching for all along. She didn't need a letter to tell her what her heart already knew, because Noah was here. And this was their love story. The real one. The one she was always meant to find. The one she was finally ready to write together. 1 year later, Elena stretched in bed, her fingers lazily reaching for the warmth beside her, only to find empty sheets. She frowned, eyes fluttering open. The spot where Noah should have been was cold. She groaned, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. Noah. Silence. She glanced at the clock. 6:45 a.m. Too early for him to be up. Noah was not a morning person. Curious, she slipped out of bed and padded toward the living room. That's when she smelled it, coffee, and something sweet. She turned the corner and stopped. Noah stood in the kitchen, messy-haired and shirtless, flipping pancakes with a look of pure concentration. A smile tugged at her lips. You're cooking? Noah jumped slightly, nearly dropping the spatula. He turned, looking caught. You weren't supposed to wake up yet. She folded her arms, amused. Is that why you stole my alarm clock? He grinned sheepishly. Maybe. Elena shook her head, stepping closer. What's the occasion? Noah hesitated, then gestured to the small table set up behind him. A single candle, her favorite flowers in a vase, and 2 plates of, well, slightly burnt pancakes. Her heart swelled. Noah. He rubbed the back of his neck. I know we don't make a big deal about anniversaries, but it's been exactly a year since you showed up at my door that night.
His voice softened.
Since you chose me. Elena's breath caught. She hadn't even realized. You remember the date? She asked, touched. Noah smirked. Of course. It's the day my life stopped being a tragic poetry collection and actually became good. She laughed, wrapping her arms around his waist. Well, you still sound like a tragic poet. Yeah, he muttered, kissing her forehead. Now sit. I made breakfast. She eyed the pancakes. Are they safe to eat? Noah scoffed. I'll have you know, these are gourmet. She took a bite and immediately struggled not to cough. Noah watched her expectantly. Well, she forced a smile. Delicious. His eyes narrowed. You're lying. She burst out laughing. Okay, maybe a little. Noah groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Unbelievable. I followed the recipe exactly. Elena leaned up, pressing a kiss to his cheek. It's perfect, she murmured. His shoulders relaxed, and a slow smile spread across his lips. Yeah. She laced her fingers through his. Because you made it for me. Noah chuckled, shaking his head. You're too easy to please. She grinned. Only when it comes to you. And as they sat there, laughing over terrible pancakes and stolen kisses, Elena realized something. Noah had always loved her, through words, through letters, through quiet gestures, through the way he had always been there. But now, she loved him back in the same way. Not just in grand declarations or poetic confessions, but in the little things, in burnt pancakes and sleepy mornings, in laughter and teasing and knowing glances, in choosing him, again and again, every single day. And that was the greatest love story of all. Theirs.